introducing our next speaker, I just want to ask that anyone who has a black Chevy Cavalier connected plate 450 SMD, it's going to be towed unless it's moved. So, there you go. All right. See, look at this, it works. Okay, it's my honor to introduce John Kirby, the filmmaker who directed the new ad we're about to see. John began his career as a researcher on a 3-part history of the CIA for the Discovery Channel, which garnered the Columbia DuPont Silver Baton. From there, he worked as an editor and producer on numerous award-winning films for every network from HBO to PBS. His feature directorial debut, The American Ruling Class, starred longtime Harper's Magazine editor Louis Lapham and was a co-production of the BBC and the Sundance Channel. That film went on to win numerous honors, toured the international festival circuit from Amsterdam to South Africa, won second prize at the Tribeca Film Festival, received special screenings from the American Film Institute in Washington to the U.S. Consulate in Paris, and became the highest-grossing film in 1 year sales in the history of the U.S. educational market. In addition to the ad campaign for Building 7, John is working on various projects, including the hybrid dramatic documentary that inspires the use of war and crisis to centralize wealth and power through American history. And I just want to mention, I really appreciate what John's did. And he's someone that I could probably speak to for hours upon hours upon hours about not just this event, but so many other geopolitical events that we are still learning about today. Everyone, John Kirby.
Thanks so much, Manny. We're so lucky to have someone with Manny's intelligence and drive working on this. Those of us who have come to believe at various points in the 9.5 years since 9/11 that the truth of what happened that day is considerably different from what we've been told by our government face a significant problem when we try to relate that belief to others. No matter how obvious the facts may appear, no matter how abundant the evidence readily available to anyone willing to look at it, we know that many people are, nevertheless, unwilling to look. Besides the not inconsiderable intellectual challenge involved in recognizing government perfidy on so large a scale, there's an even more potent emotional barrier. Far from producing a comforting feeling that everything is under control, as is often smugly and foolishly suggested, apprehending 9/11 for what it is an extremely painful and ongoing process. But no matter how difficult it is to come to grips with it, many of us believe that the truth, or something more nearly approximating it, is profoundly important for the country and the world to understand. It is a necessary, if insufficient, condition of changing the world for the better. The challenge has been to find the right tone with which to raise the right questions. I think that the Building What ad campaign, newly rechristened Remember Building 7, has found the right tone. In the first place, the involvement of family members and architects and engineers is obviously crucial. They give us moral and intellectual authority far in excess of that of the perpetrators. In the second place, the venue, primetime television, remains, even in the internet age, the best place to reach new audiences. I think we have also found the right question. Though there is damning evidence of state involvement to be found in every facet of 9/11, the collapse of Building 7 is the most glaring, the most egregious, the most clearly inexplicable in the government's terms. As many of you no doubt know, the last ad we did, which raised over $100,000 on the internet for its television run, was seen by over 1 million people in the New York metropolitan area, including, of all people, Geraldo Rivera on Fox News. Geraldo, who took it upon himself to hunt for bin Laden in the deserts of Afghanistan, had previously been just one more of the many mainstream media figures to publicly discount any alternative to the official 9/11 narrative. But after watching the ad, he brought Bob McElvain and Tony Zimbardi onto his show for a segment that I will show you in a moment. But first, I want you to read some excerpts of a review. I want to read you some excerpts of a review of that show and the first ad, which appeared in rawstory.com. The headline goes, Geraldo, quote, much more open-minded about 9/11 thanks to NYC television ads. A new television, it's by Stephen Webster, who writes a very good piece here. A new television ad campaign featuring the family members of 9/11 victims has succeeded in garnering what 9/11 activists have lacked for years, serious treatment in the mainstream media. Granted, that media was Fox News host Geraldo Rivera, who in a former iteration ran a Jerry Springer-like daytime talk show. That, and the last time Rupert Murdoch's conservative-tilted television channel seriously talked about issues pertaining to 9/11, they were calling for a public official's resignation over his signature on one of the 9/11 truth petitions. Still, at the end of his serious yet brief treatment of questions surrounding the collapse of World Trade Center 7, Rivera admitted that the activists had made him, quote, much more open-minded about questions surrounding 9/11. Rivera spoke in response to an ad playing in 30-second bites on screens all around New York City, which does not focus on conspiracy theories. It does not feature hip-hop beats in the background or winded, red-faced protesters dressed in black shouting at reporters. It doesn't even mention President George W. Bush, former Vice President Dick Cheney, or the systemic failures in America's air defenses. Instead, it puts the spotlight on people who lost family members in the 2001 attacks. Patriotic background music plays as viewers are gently reminded that not 2, but 3 buildings collapsed on 9/11. And I'll just read one last bit from that. He goes on to summarize the show, and then he says, Geraldo agreed that it looked like a structure, quote, being demolished by the professionals who can actually collapse a building right into its own footprint. Why do you think they're lying about it? He asked, inviting his guest, Tony Zambati, the mechanical engineer, to speculate. Zambati didn't take the bait. I don't really know all the details of why they're lying about it, he said, affirming his position without dipping into the conspiratorial nature of the various 9/11 theories. I can't read their minds. All I can say is, scientifically, it's impossible for fire to have done what we saw. So he goes on to say how it made him much more open-minded. While we watch the clip, we should consider what its very existence says about the state corporate media. Namely, that it is not entirely monolithic, and that certain personalities have some measure of control over what they examine on the air and in print. These people can be reached, and a critical mass of skepticism might be achieved. Though we know from previous experience that it is a distinct possibility for a given owner, editor, or journalist, most of them are probably not working directly for an intelligence service. The problem remains one of ideological control, which disseminates from government press releases and state-created pseudo-realities into the minds of media workers and from there to everyone else. I know more than a few of these people. Academy and Emmy award-winning filmmakers, magazine editors and writers, former bureau chiefs, novelists, print journalists, and editors. Many of these are very good people who are willing to give a hearing to the facts of 9/11, but in varying degrees have been unable to accept their implications. Until now. This campaign works. I have seen the first ad and the subsequent Geraldo show break through the walls of perception in the minds of campaign managers, federal judges, lobbyists, press agents, and all the media figures mentioned above. Even the story of the ad's journey from internet to air to Geraldo to Judge Napolitano's show, also ironically enough on the Fox family of channels, has the power to open minds. So with apologies for those of you who may have already seen it, let's watch the Geraldo piece. You will notice that while he is highly interruptive, it is in the attempted service of getting the story out there. So let's see if I can figure this system out. Okay.
Live and at large, it's the one 9/11 mystery that endures. World Trade Center building number 7.
Keep your eye on that building as they're coming down, son.
They were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
And so the first one was likely an accident, the second one was an attack, and the third was a declaration of war.
The publication of the Bush memoir fills in some of what we did not know about 9/11. But no official account so far addresses the issue now being raised in an extraordinary ad campaign.
I lost my son
My nephew.
My
son.
on September 11th, 2001.
Most people don't know that a third tower fell on September 11th.
World Trade Center 7, a 47-story skyscraper, was not hit by a plane.
Although the official explanation is that fire brought down Building 7
Over 1,200 architects and engineers has looked into the evidence.
and believe there's more to the story.
Up until now, only those considered nut jobs questioned the official conclusion that office fires caused by the nearby catastrophe of the towers collapsing brought down building number 7.
But I do believe that it is the first time in history that fire has ever melted steel. I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved.
And if explosives were involved, that would mean that the most obnoxious protesters in recent years are right. If you had a shovel,
9/11 was an inside job. Oh, get a life. Get a life. 9/11 was an inside job. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Geraldo Rivera, and that noisy demonstration was more than 2 years ago. But the folks behind that TV ad you saw earlier are not so easy to dismiss as those demonstrators were. And what caught my eye is their claim that more than 1,300 architects and engineers examined the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Before we examine what they have, this heads up. Also tonight, we probe the remorseless Randall Moore, the creep who raped and murdered his own wife and then outrageously taunted her family at his sentencing. And we're live tonight on the bloody Mexico border, the most dangerous place on earth right now. Those stories coming up. But up front tonight, Building 7 was no ordinary building. Among other key tenants, including several intelligence and law enforcement agencies, it also housed New York City's Emergency Operations Center, known as Mayor Giuliani's bunker. Here to tell us what they know about its collapse and why they question the official conclusions are Bob McIlvaine, whose son died in the World Trade Center, and Tony Zambati, a mechanical engineer. Nice to see you guys. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ron. Nice to meet you, Ron. Our condolences, obviously, for your loss. But Tony, let me start with you. You're an engineer. Are you suggesting that the official account that Building 7 collapsed because of the fire melting the steel or in some other ways, destroying the integrity, the structural integrity of the building, that's false? You think that that's false?
Yes, I do. And for a couple of reasons. One is that Building 7 came down, it went into a sudden collapse across the full width and length of the building for 2.25 seconds, which amounted to 105 feet or 8 stories, 8 13-foot tall stories. It was in full free fall acceleration. That is impossible because in a natural collapse, columns would have to buckle. When columns buckle, there is a minimum resistance. It's asymptotic. You know what that means. That means it never goes to zero. So it's impossible. You can't reach.
So here's what, I guess in layman's terms, to just get my hands here, Peter. So what he's saying is that the top floor collapses, hits the next floor, hits the next floor, hits the next floor, so it's bang, 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 the weight of the upper floors.
It would slow down. What I'm trying to say is it was in full free fall acceleration. All of its potential energy was being
It's
converted
there
to
what I
motion.
just described. The thing just collapsed like a pancake.
It just came down.
And so what do you suggest they brought it down, Tony?
I'm suggesting there was some form of demolition devices in that building for 8 stories or more.
You think that the explosives brought down Building 7?
Some form of demolition device. I'm not pretending to know what it is. I am saying that it was in free fall acceleration.
All right, let me ask you
They
this.
admitted to that.
Okay, let me ask you this before I get to Dad, before I get to Bob here. We've all seen old, obsolete buildings and public housing in other places outlive their usefulness, being demolished by the professionals who can actually collapse a building right in its own footprint. That's what it looks like happened to Building 7. Do you believe that's what happened?
Yes, I do believe that's what happened.
And why do you think they're lying about it?
I don't really know all the details of why they're lying about it. I can't read their minds. All I can say is